What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be taking a look over here at the Bitcoin price chart, along with the altcoin market and the XRP price chart, as today could be an interesting day over there in the stock market and over here in crypto, as we have the VIX, or the Volatility Index, above 25 today, heading into the market opening. We've got Bitcoin down in the 82,000s as a record. That could absolutely change by the time this video is live. It could be much higher, much lower. The velocity we're moving at is quite aggressive, but we're at an area of interest for Bitcoin and for the crypto market. And there's good things, there's bad things. We'll kind of try to paint the picture, but it's definitely not something crystal clear where I'm like, hey, I've got to blast my cash into this market, even though, like, thinking about it way ahead of time, I would have thought this would be an area where I would do it. I'll show you where there's some complications to say, there's things to still kind of be cautious about out there. First of all, with Bitcoin and where it's at, I mean, we've gone very deep in here into this range. I could have picked several spots higher than this that you'd finally start to see some type of retracement to come out of here, and it just has refused to show up. Even areas like this, getting down below this 0.236 retrace of this current range right in here, is quite low for even ranges like these, which is what I would think would be a reasonable type of structure that you would end up building here for Bitcoin before it does go test all these areas down in here, is that it would look something along the lines of like that and then roll over and go and do it. However, even getting way down here, it's just so low. So are you at an area of interest? Yes, but still there's like no signs of a bounce emerging from it yet. So tough to make a call on saying there's an obvious sign saying it's ready to reverse or anything like that. I just don't see it. But I can tell you, I sit here and stare at this, unlike, back in late September and early October of being like terrified. It is more of like, man, wow, is a bounce going to show up in here? You would sure think one would. Now, things that are implying that it's not so favorable and like you wouldn't actually think that a bounce is going to be coming soon is at least when you look over here at the altcoin market and what it's doing. And I talked about this earlier this week, last week. Here's a tweet from November 14th talking about Elliott wave theory, of it being like an ABC of what happened in here and here, and that, we're just kind of hovering on top of the support level over in here. Well, as you can see in a continuation wave down, if this was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ABC, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you would not be looking for a long-term bottom to show up in here, and that it would be looking like it's ready to break down and gain even more momentum in here. So this is a concerning sign for me, where at the same time, it's like, man, I'm surprised we have not found a support in here. But at the same time, looking over it here, it's like it doesn't even look like there's one anywhere close. One of the things I've talked about has been Zcash, and that I would start exiting more of my position in Zcash. And I did, again, at $702. I am now 90% out of Zcash after it hit this 4.236 extension on its market cap. And so this structure would tell me that we're likely ending this run for Zcash and this excitement for Zcash, while the altcoin market is looking pretty dicey over in here. And, again, I reiterate, it's like, hey, boy, it's so rare to come down here. And seriously, it's really rare to not come down here and do that. So it's still like, don't get me wrong, it still seems the most probable. Will it do it? I don't know, but it's the most probable thing that ends up happening is in these types of environments, you do something like that. But it's fascinating to see that we don't see that same behavior from like the altcoin market. And there's some structural breaks that are happening in the altcoin market that are a little bit concerning. Also, there on November 14th, I tweeted I can probably find more, but I'm not liking what I'm seeing on some of these with larger time frames. Ondo has that classic no bueno setup, or not good setup, again, acting like Q4 of 2021, not 2017, in which we see these types of topping behaviors in 2021, 2017, and 2025, in which, at this time, this is at 58 cents here for Ondo, showing how, when these things break these support levels, well, there you go. It's no longer 58 cents. It's now down to 45, and it's breaking those support levels, as you do see happen in these things. So, then you have to say, was Ondo acting in an isolated chamber of its own, or is this broadly happening in the market? We can find lots of coins that are just kind of breaking down and breaking supports. SWI is one of them as well, taking out the support level from back in April, right? This is like what we've seen over there on MicroStrategy that has definitely taken out that March and April low over in here, way down over in here. Yeah, Bitcoin hasn't gotten to those levels, right? And so you have things that don't look super great over here in the altcoin market. And, things, there's nothing screaming that the bottom of Bitcoin is coming in just yet. A lot of times when they do come in, they just show up with high volume. It's a big reversal. And then we all look back on it in hindsight and say, whoop, there it was. But I see things in here to make me uncomfortable of being like blasting cash into the market due to seeing things like this and Ondo and SWI and the altcoin market structurally. Obviously for the last month, the discussions have really been about the post-liquidation range, and that, there's a lot of optimism in the market in a post-liquidation range, but they typically just continue going lower. You can see total 3 has now broken below the October 10th liquidation low, places that people thought we would never see, but it's very common, right? We have our post-liquidation range. We'll break down, come back to back test, right? Break down, come back to back test. And so, now it's in an environment, right? What have you done? You've gone below the liquidation range. You're wicking down in here. How deep will that wick end up going after you've gotten here? And then, what would a ricochet end up looking like right now? And it's not to say that all of those look identical and do the exact same thing. They can totally take various forms. And, bearish price action is 100 times more difficult than bullish price action, because we're met with stair stepping and ranging and washing machines and all that difficult stuff at the same time. Then, of course, any type of bounce that comes, it convinces the crowd that the bottom is actually in every single time. But earlier in the video, I had mentioned, the VIX, the volatility index. And I want to talk about this for just a second, because obviously the stock market has been continuing lower. It's falling and falling. Yesterday was a crazy day because it gapped up 2% at the opening and then closed down 2% into the close. But the Russell 2000, of course, hitting that 4.236 extension, unable to exceed it and still continuing to march lower and lower, right? But this is the volatility index of the S&P 500, and getting above 25 historically is a moment of extreme caution of where things can kind of get nutty in the market. And I've always kind of left this, if it stays above here, watch out on this 25 marker, because these are moments in time where things, again, can get kind of nutty. When you look back on this range in here, right, when we exploded through 25, that marked the bottom of Bitcoin for that move. You head over in here, this is a different one where it actually marks our top for Bitcoin in this move. Otherwise, all of them mark bottoms. This one marks the ending of this range, and then again hitting it again, completely marking the bottom. This one over here marks the bottom of this move in here after it liquidates there on October 10th, right? It continues drifting down lower for Bitcoin. It shoots above 25 for the volatility in the stock market, and then it bounces for a little while, convincing everybody things are going to be okay. But what's going to be interesting today is to see if it's really just one of these moves where it just kind of barely gets through and then it just kind of goes back down and doesn't really do much, and that's the end of it. Or do we actually get a really big explosive move coming out of the volatility index? Typically, if you're going to get out, right, and if it's going to be explosive, you don't come above and hang out for a day or 2 or 3 and then later do it. You got to get out and you go. Volatility just erupts. And so today, the last day of the trading week, will be an interesting one to see if volatility is going to actually erupt, because in these, what did they do? They marked actual bottoms. Now, I'm not saying whatever bottom comes in here is going to be the start of another leg for a bull market, but obviously looking for some type of bounce for some type of retracement at a minimum, right? I don't know if it's going to come, but I see an interesting setup in here that, are we about to see a volatility explosion happen in the stock market today? And if so, that has tended to mark the end of moves. Doesn't mean this move goes like this and goes into a new bull run, but you've seen this before, right? We've seen this really over the last couple of years when volatility absolutely explodes. That marks the end of the move. And of course, I'm using blue on blue, but, show you there, right? These were the bottoms right in here. And then, we were able to recover from that. And so that marked our extreme area. So pay attention to this today into the end of the week. We'll see if volatility explodes up in here, or is it just kind of crumble back down? As we've seen the last couple of times, if there is some type of event that is extreme explosive volatility, that can mark our lows. Sometimes it only lasts a day or 2. Sometimes it lasts 3 days, considering it's the end of the week. We'll see. But I think this is kind of the main thing to be paying attention to today. So again, things that are just kind of, going against Bitcoin for being a bull market and still acting like the 2021 to 2022 bear is, of course, we still see the US dollar currency index still continuing to hum on a along. This is exactly how it ended in 2021. There's been all those parallels to show that still all these parallels are happening, not to mention the Russell rejecting from the 4.236 at this moment, and all the other stuff we've talked about when it comes to identifying the bearish divergences on the weekly time frame and over here on the MACD and relative strength index. As you can see in here with all this move, right? This is the bull market support level that started way back over in here, right? So right from our bottom when we take off, this is a bull market support level on relative strength. As you can see, that is a clear change here for the first time, which of course over here on the monthly, we have the same thing happening where we break down from there, where you can clearly see that versus the upward price action that has happened in here, that this is still above this level over in here, right? And we obviously have our MACD cross and all that stuff. And so you just go back through time and we talk about these, and I spent a lot of time on it. I won't go too in depth on it, but we've got all the signs that we're just trading a different market now. It was speculated that all those signs were showing up back in late September and early October. Now it's starting to become pretty much obvious. So, obviously it's not just the DXY. You got all the indicators on Bitcoin, you got all that stuff. And, I'd love to come on here and sprinkle some good news and some good vibes and all that type of stuff. And don't get me wrong. It's not that I'm like looking for it and thinking, hey man, it'd be great for it to show up. But it's just, I would really like to see some confluence markers happening at the same time. And I don't see them. It's not to say it won't just magically reverse on itself, but because of the area that it's already in. And if the VIX explodes today or reverses back below 25, that would be a perfect marker for it to happen. But I just don't see those same signs in the altcoin market with things that we're seeing, like I just showed with Ondo and Sui and others and Zcash and all that type of stuff. I just don't see it there. So I think we'll need to kind of like let this play out a little bit here throughout the weekend and see if anything obvious shows up. Like, of course, things we'll look for just be like a high volume green candle, right? And, everybody wants to be the one to perfectly catch the bottom, right? And it's a knife catch, right? Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people watching right now who have tried to catch this thing as it's gone down, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. Then, of course, it reverses, and it's like, oh, you missed the bottom. You probably had to get cut a lot of times for anybody who does end up catching the bottom. It's very rare, certainly in an area of interest, but there's some concerns over in here that leave me a little bit uneasy on trying to make the attempt to do it. So I'll be watching the VIX today. I'll be watching the stock market today. We'll see if we get some type of volatility explosion and something that can end up marking a bottom. $81,700 over here for Bitcoin. XRP not acting really any differently than what we'd expect in here if this was truly what's going on, that we are acting more like late 2021 rather than everybody who was looking for late 2017. Again, even in these types of things, you'd probably be looking for some type of bounces to show up in here, just not seeing any signs of it yet. So waiting for something obvious to show up, right? We can all sit here and say, I bet it's going to go to $1.80, and that's where it's going to happen. I don't know. We have to have some evidence show up to say, hey, look, this looks like a sign that was the mark of the low. Otherwise, it's just a knife catch to try to get there. So we'll see how things go throughout the weekend and throughout today. I'm really more interested in today and what's going to happen with the stock market today. So keep your eyes on the VIX, keep your eyes on the stock market. And I think if there's going to be signs coming in here, they'll come from there too. But as for me, not too quick to go ahead and try to knife catch this thing just yet. But for those who do try to play the hero, I get it. It would make sense to try to play the hero right here. I see it. And believe me, I'm watching these charts much more than you may think. I may not be tweeting much, or, like I said, when we get to this, the videos would kind of cut down. We're doing about 3, videos and live streams per week. But I would definitely say I'm spending way more time in these charts than I do normally. In a given year, the amount of time that has been spent, these past couple of weeks actually staring at the charts and trying to dissect these and understanding, it's probably 2 to 3 times more time is spent watching these charts and analyzing and studying these, trying to look for the very clear stuff. So when I do come on here and put content out for you guys, I'm doing my absolute best to try to not be the if, then this, that, if this happens, then that happens, up, down, left, right, A, B start. I hate being that guy. I hate seeing that kind of content. I think it's just word salad that gets played a lot on TA. It's all a mind trick when those things are said. They're used to cover all bases, and then whatever happens, you can be right. I just try to do my absolute best to not do that. So it may be fewer videos, but when I'm putting stuff together to try to present it to you, I'm trying to do it not with just, spending a short amount of time on the charts. I'm spending a lot of time on the charts to try to figure this stuff out before I come on here and even talk. I do think we're in a very interesting place for Bitcoin, where in these types of structures, if this is going to be, a year-long bear market, for the first leg, are things acting like what a first leg would look like? Yeah, there's like no narrative for it, right? And that's perfect, right? Look back to all the past ones on, what narratives were like when you get scared out of the market, right? In this, of course, it's all the Trump stuff, it's all the tariff stuff. In this one, it's all the Israel conflict stuff happening in here, right? To shake people out. And then we talk about it that, when you get to the other side of it, right, there's no narrative, right? The crowd is still excited. The crowd is still euphoric. They don't believe that it's actually a bear market. We know that because that's what they always do when you finally get to the other side. And we see all the indicators showing it of the other side. But even if we are on the other side, you try to think of like reasonable price structure that happens in those environments. And these are reasonable types of price structures, right? These are reasonable types of price structures. Will it play differently? Of course, we saw in 2022 it did. But we can't just, we can do that, right? We could sit there and say, here's your blueprint. We're already there. We're below the 0.236. Bounce likely incoming, taking it back to, 92 to 94 and blah, blah, blah. But even then, right, what are you looking for? There's at least a baby retrace. So, being in this environment, it's still typical that some type of retracement happens in here. Just a very complicated picture when it comes to the altcoin market at the same time due to the breaks that we are seeing happening in there. But for those who wanted to play hero here, I would get it. I would understand, left brain, right brain, mid curve. Right? I think left brain and right brain would both go for it. It's the mid curve of being like, I don't know. But just know from a TA perspective and from a ranging perspective and the things we've expected out of this market, it just does seem reasonable that Bitcoin's going to find some support in these regions, whether it's 2022 or even past behaviors that we've identified the whole time. I think the thing for trying to find the confluence for me to say that this would end up being it, for at least to stop this momentum, would likely be to watch what the VIX does in here today. So that's kind of the thing I'm looking for. Does the VIX go ahead and finish the week by closing back down below 25, or do we actually see an explosion happen in here that will mark a low like we typically see? Either way, drifting back down below 25, that does at least mark a temporary low multiple times over for that to happen. So that'll be kind of the watch today, either an explosion in the VIX or hopefully a drift back down below 25. So we'll see how things go. And there's one comment I do want to make, because I still think, we're in that area where a lot of people are questioning, is this a bull market? Is this a bear market? And one of the arguments that we hear a lot, or that I'm seeing over there on X a lot, and people are regurgitating, is, well, this is just a normal move, right? Where's the Luna collapse? Where's the Celsius? Where's the Three Arrows Capital, the digital currency group? Where's the FTX collapse, right? And what I think people have forgotten is that in this move, none of those things ended up happening. All of that happened in this one, right? And then FTX finishes it off, right? It's right here where Luna and UST collapse. It's right here where Celsius collapse. There was nothing that happened in this one. This was a quiet fall, and it was very similar to where the crowd was still screaming that we're going to go up, but it was just a quiet fall that kept marching down and down and down. So if you're holding on to that narrative, just know, have your context correct, that it wasn't this fall where any of that happened. It was all this one where it did. So it was having to break this support down in here that ended up breaking all of those other things in the crypto market. Either way, we'll not harp on that too much. Try not to come on here and be a complete doomer today. We are at an area of interest. There's no question we're at an area of interest. Thing is, there's mixed signals coming from, the VIX. There's mixed signals coming from the altcoin market. So let's get through today, as we do know that we're at an area of interest, and let's see if we can get some confluence markers to show up at the same time, because I don't want to come across as being like total doomer at this exact moment, because reality wise is, even on these post-liquidation ranges and doing things like this, it's likely still more ranging does end up happening. So we're just waiting for some markers to end up showing up in here and hopefully alleviate some of the pain happening in the market. I'm getting text messages, I'm getting stuff over there on X, and that's typically a pretty good sign. People reaching their breaking point, that means we're pushing an extreme. So we'll look for some confluences to show up in here today. We'll look for these things to try to kind of clear themselves up, to not have such a mixed picture in here. And there's a lot of things that would tell you, hey, we're at a super area of interest, but then other things flash and other things. So maybe by the end of the day, we get we kind of get what we're looking for, and we could say, all right, time to take a deep breath here for a minute. So next week will be a short week due to it being the Thanksgiving holiday, but I will check in with you guys on Monday as we get through this moment, because it does seem like here in the next few days, when you're moving at this type of velocity, something big is likely to show up here within the next couple of days, right? And that could be at least a temporary reversal showing up or a VIX spike or something. It feels like something is going to happen here within the next 72 hours that we'll be able to talk about on Monday. But then I will be off for the rest of the week for Thanksgiving. I do that every year. I started that in 2021 after going through 2020 and working through the holidays essentially every single day. Then, of course, in 2020, then the SEC sued Ripple and XRP got delisted from all the exchanges just a couple of days before Christmas, and essentially had no holidays in 2020. So the charts will always be here when we get back. It's not about where we're trying to get to. It's about enjoying the journey at the same time. So spend some time with your family, have a nice holiday, and then, of course, we can all come back to this stuff. So I will check in with you Monday. I am going to suspect we will not just be sitting steady here. Come on Monday. There will be something to talk about. So I'll see you guys then. In the meantime, of course, you can check out my newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com. We talk all about this, right? The market is obviously dependent on a retrace showing up within here. And then, of course, all these confluences still showing up of tops for Bitcoin. There's a 30-minute audio recording that I do with these after I write them. So I write them, I record them, talk about the charts. That's available in here. You can just pop it in your ears and go for a walk or something. But that's available at blockchainbacker.substack.com. There's a link in the description of all of my videos to the newsletter right here, or you can just go directly to blockchainbacker.substack.com. Otherwise, guys, have an absolutely wonderful weekend. And I want to thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor, but if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.